everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I am so grateful to have you guys here. My name is McKaylee. I'm the Director of Marketing and Events at Tattered Bookstore. Like I said, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to be able to continue doing these virtual events. We have a very fascinating one today with a wonderful, touching, heartfelt story attached to it. And I'm excited to share it with you guys. So just a couple of updates about Tattered Cover. 3 of our 4 stores are open right now: Aspen Grove, Union Station, and our Colfax Avenue location. We're working on getting our lower downtown location set up. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we can do that sometime this week. Right now, we're aiming for Thursday, and we'll make an announcement across social media and on our website when that store is open as well. Additional information is that our Aspen Grove suburban location is now open 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. So you guys can come in on Mondays as well, which is when we were previously closed. However, you always can go to our website, tatteredcover.com, and shop 24/7. We are happy. Thank you so much for continuing to support local independent bookstores during this crazy time in our world, and we're just grateful for your support. And this is something that we hope that we can give back to you, the community, through these virtual events. Since we cannot meet together as a physical community space, we're happy to do it virtually. And I also just want to let you know that closed captioning is available for those who might need it. You just have to click the button that says CC on your video there, and the closed captioning will be available. So I want to move on now to introducing the author that we have here today, John Perkins. His bio starts as chief economist. Of course, I'm going to say that wrong. I apologize. At a major international consulting firm, John Perkins advised the World Bank, United Nations, IMF, U.S. Treasury Department, Fortune 500 corporations, and leaders of the countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East. The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman, a follow-up to John's classic New York Times bestseller, brings the story of economic hitmen and jackal assassins up to date and chillingly home to the U.S. It goes on to provide practical strategies to transform the failing global death economy into regenerative life economy. His books have sold over 2 million copies and are published in 37 languages. He's the founder of the nonprofit organizations, the Pachama Alliance and Dream Change. He is here talking about his book today, Touching the Jaguar. I am going to welcome John and turn on his microphone and video now. There we go. He'll be joining me in just a moment. There he is. Hello.
Hi. So I'm on. I can't see myself, but I guess I'm there, huh?
Yes, I see you.
There I am. Yeah. And I'm joined here by my Jaguar.
Yay! Oh, she's so beautiful.
She's actually an American cat, but she looks a lot like a Jaguar.
It's the best way to open up any sort of author talk, I firmly believe anyway. And it's kind of cool. These virtual events allow us to get a peek into the author's lives and see their pets too.
Yeah, and Michaela, I have to say she loves being on these events. She actually does.
She's a secret ham, a camera hog.
Yeah, she'll look at us sometimes. Okay. So anyway, it's great to be here with you.
Yes, thank you.
I've been personally at your bookstores, one or many of them, a number of times in the past, and I'm sorry I'm not there in person, but it's great to have the opportunity to be here and reach people who couldn't probably ever make it into a bookstore.
Exactly, which is, we were talking about the benefits of technology earlier, and this really has brought a whole new level to events, which is very exciting. So, well, we're here to talk about your book, Touching the Jaguar, which is an incredible look into so many things that I have to be honest, I did not know a lot about, being an English major, but I'd love it if you could start by, telling us what are the main themes of this book.
Well, yeah, and I'd like to say also that if people liked Confessions of an Economic Hitman, they're going to love this book because it goes a step further. And if they didn't read Confessions of an Economic Hitman, now they don't need to.
You've pushed your other book out of commission.
It's what's called nonfiction narrative nonfiction. In other words, I tell stories, true stories, and I like to write in stories because I think economic theories can be boring unless they're put in the context of stories. And there's a lot of themes, but I think probably we could say the major ones are first, that our perceptions mold our reality. When you come right down to it, there's no United States, there's no Russia, there's no Canada, there's no businesses, there's no culture, there's no religion except as we perceive them. And when enough people accept a perception, it becomes reality. Or when we codify it into law, it becomes reality. So perceptions mold reality. The second theme, I would say, is that our perception of what it means to be materialistically successful in this time has really taken us into a huge crisis. It is behind the pandemic. It is behind racial discrimination. It's what we call a death economy, and we can get into that. It's a global overarching system, and it's all created around a perception. The third theme would be that it's the way to change it is by changing the perception, by creating what we call a life economy. And really all that takes is a change in perception of what the goal of our whole system is, what the goal of us as human beings is. That's all it takes, is a change in perception. And then a lot of actions to make it actually happen. And so that gets into the fourth theme, which is that we've actually got some really great examples from indigenous people in the Amazon that I've worked with, and also recent movements in business. There've been tremendous movements in the business world and the political world throughout the globe that help us move into this life economy. And then the fifth and last theme that I would mention today, there's a lot of sub-themes, but is that every one of the readers has a role to play in this. And in the end of the book, I spell out a practice that people can do. I say it's about a 10-minute practice. You can do it every day or once a week. That helps you really look at what is your role in making a better life for yourself in the world. You know, the subtitle of the book is right here, and you know, the subtitle. I like the subtitle. I like the Jaguar.
It's an excellent cover. You got very lucky.
I like this, and you know, transforming fear into action to change your life and the world. And I think, yeah, and I'm touching that Jaguar most of the time here.
That's awesome.
Not to mention the fact I live with a baby Jaguar. So those are kind of the main themes: is perceptions control reality, and our current perception around success has created a failing system, a death economy. We can change that economy into a life economy by changing perception, and four, that we have some really good models for doing that already. And five is every reader has a role to play in this. I think this is a very, very exciting time to be alive, frankly.
I'm curious, you talk about that fifth point, and maybe without necessarily giving up a ton of spoilers, because we definitely want people to read the book and to experience the stories that you give us. But I'm curious if you could talk about what it is exactly a person might be able to do to change their life and make a better world.
Yeah, so if we look at, let's go back first, it's a little bit like, what is a death economy? You know, yeah, and it's an economic system that basically is consuming itself into extinction. It's based on the perception that the only responsibility of business is to maximize short-term profits, regardless of the social and environmental costs. And that is the driving force behind Wall Street. It's the driving force behind all major corporations around the world today. Maximize short-term profits, regardless of the social and environmental costs. And for us as individuals, really, and probably a lot of your listeners don't buy into this, but in general, it's maximizing our short-term materialistic consumption, regardless of the environmental costs and social costs. And that has created this economic system that is destroying itself. It's consuming the resources it needs in the long term to meet its short-term profit maximization. And it gives CEOs the mandate actually to do whatever it takes to maximize short-term profits, including bribing politicians, which now that's passed laws to do that, you know, so that our campaigns are financed by corporations, and destroying the environment and exploiting workers. And that's the death economy. The life economy, on the other hand, it pays investors rates of return and hires people to clean up pollution, to regenerate destroyed environments, to recycle, to create new technologies that will use the wind and the sun more effectively. And it's just based on a change in perception. And that is that the goal of business and all of us is to maximize long-term benefits for people on the planet. It's not to go back and live in caves. It's to say that we want to maximize long-term benefits for ourselves. And it actually means that we'll probably live happier lives maybe not quite as materialistic,
Yeah.
but happier, more satisfying lives. And so if we look at what can each of us do as an individual, well, one thing that we can all do is, we all know, we all talk about shopping, sustainably, being aware of how we shop, being conscious. But beyond that, we need to let the companies that we don't buy from know why we're not buying from them. We need to let the companies that we do buy from know why we are buying from them, that they're doing better. They're working toward this life economy. And and that's so easy these days with the internet, with social media. And I'd go beyond that and say that every one of your listeners could pick a company. I mean, everybody can pick whatever the company you'd like to see change, whether it's Walmart or Nike or Exxon or whatever it is, and write them a message. Twitter, Facebook, whatever, however you do it, Instagram, and say, I love your products, but I'm not going to buy them anymore until you pay your workers in India a fair salary, or clean up the pollution you've caused, or whatever. Send it to the company, and also send it to all your social networking circles, and ask them to send it to all of theirs. And we can get into this more, but I know a lot of chief executive officers that are looking to get this kind of information so they can then go to their investors and say, hey, we've got to listen to our consumers. And so that's something that we all can do. But beyond that, in the book, I describe this daily practice that basically addresses 5 questions. And it's a little practice that you can do around these 5 questions that each of us can answer, that will help each of us move forward with what we each personally can do. Because I don't know what all your listeners do, but I know they all have passion and they all have skills. How does each one apply those? 5 questions.
And I love that. That's what I love, is that you make it so simple and something that anybody can understand. And like you said, make it very universal. Depending on what your profession is, what your cultural background is, it really just applies to the human experience. And I'm curious about how this started for you. And I think it leans into the title a little bit, which is another question I have of how did you come across this title, and how does that play into the book?
Yeah, I'll go into that. And just as a teaser for your listeners, let's define those 5 questions a little later. I'll mention, people don't have to wait for the book.
Okay, great. I wasn't sure.
I'm happy to do that. But this started for me when I was in the Amazon as a Peace Corps volunteer, and the story is detailed in the book, but the short version is, this is 1968. I go to the Amazon as a Peace Corps volunteer. I'm sent deep into the jungle to live with the Shuar people, who are this, if you hear noise in the background, it's that kitten.
It's the cat, the darn Jaguar. She's creating ambiance and noise, giving us an environment.
She's attacking the blinds. That's what she's doing, Anyway, she's not doing any damage. She's having a good time. So deep in the Amazon, 1968, I was living with these people who are hunters and gatherers, and in my perception, primitive, although I came to discover that they're actually extremely sophisticated, that they live very different lives. And at one point, I got very sick. I couldn't keep any food down. I was dying. And I was a 3-day terrible trip to the nearest medical facility. It involved hiking through very dense jungles, riding in a rickety old bus up a curvy road, 10,000 feet into the Andes to get to the nearest medical facility. There's no way, I couldn't even stand up on my own. And so it was terrifying. I was resigned to dying. And then one night, late one afternoon, a shaman offered to heal me. Well, I'd graduated from business school. It was 1969 now, and I'd never even heard of a shaman. But, what are the options?
Yeah.
And so that night, he takes me on this shamanic journey, this vision quest. And while I'm on this vision quest, I have my eyes closed, and I see this amorphous shape in front of me. And the shaman says to me, touch the jaguar. And I'm like, oh my God, I open my eyes like I'm in the middle of the jungle and it's nighttime, and where's the jaguar? Where's the jaguar? And he says, no. Close your eyes and see the jaguar. this amorphous form then shapeshifts into a jaguar's face. And I hear this voice like my mother saying, son, the food and drink will kill you. And at that moment, I realized that, I was raised on in 300 years of Yankee Calvinists in New England, very mild foods. And now I'm eating some very strange foods, in my opinion. A delicacy is squirming white grubs you pull out of a rotting log and down the hatch, and in the Amazon, people don't drink river water because they know it's got organic, they know it's not safe. It has organic matter that's falling at trees and branches and so on. The women make a kind of beer called chicha by chewing manioc root and spitting it. And the saliva sets up a fermentation process. You get an alcohol, and then you add water, and you can drink it. And you got to rehydrate a lot in the Amazon. So I'm drinking a lot of spit beer and eating a lot of squirming white grubs. But every time I do this, I realize on this journey, every time I do this, I'm hearing this voice in my head saying, it'll kill you. At the same time, I saw how robust and healthy the Schwa people are. Hunters and gatherers, men are all built like Tarzan, and the women are just amazing. And people live to be very old if they don't die in some sort of a hunting accident of some sort. And so I saw that night that it was not the food and drink killing me, it was my perception. That's that idea, that perception molded reality. Yeah. And the next day I was much better, and over the next few days I got completely better. And then the shaman came to me and he demanded payment. And this is a society that didn't have any currency. Money didn't mean anything to them. So what am I going to offer this guy? I don't have any papayas. So he says, you got to become my apprentice. Well, 1969, business graduate school, I had no interest. There was no future in shamanism. Like, yeah, do that. But he saved my life. So I did it. And, one of the first things he taught me, he said, touching the Jaguar, he said, that means you identify what it is that's holding you back, what's making you sick or what's keeping you from doing what you want to do in life. You identify it, and then you confront it. You don't run from it, you confront it. And when you touch that Jaguar, when you touch that's holding you back, it changes your perception. And once you change your perception, you change your actions, and then you change your life. And so, if you take it that way, the Jaguar that was holding me back was this voice saying, it'll kill you. When I touched that voice, it suddenly showed me that the same food and drink was local, organic, nutritious. I mean, really, squirming white grubs, when you come right down to it, they're extremely nutritious. And actually, I love them now.
That's brilliant.
And so I changed, that perception changed that night. Instead of it's making me sick, it's making me healthy. And as I went through the shamanic training with him, I learned all the local rituals. Right. But the main idea was how you use these rituals to help people change their perceptions and therefore change their reality. After that, when I was an economist and I was traveling around the world, I studied with shamans in Indonesia, in Iran, in Egypt, all over Latin America, all of the Americas. And everywhere I went, I found the same concept. You change reality by changing perception. And then I came to understand that that's also the basis for modern psychotherapy and for quantum physics and marketing. It's what our corporations build themselves on. If you don't wear this jacket, you're not going to get to go to that bookstore. You're not going to get to be on the show. You got to wear this jacket. There's a perception that's created, and that totally controls our reality. And as life went on, I became an economist. I realized that what I was doing as an economist was creating a perception in different countries around the world that they needed to take huge loans from the World Bank or its sister organizations to hire our corporations to build big infrastructure projects in those countries. And I had to convince them to take these loans that would make our corporations wealthy. And in the beginning, I thought it was the right thing to do because I'd been given the perception in business school that when you invest in electric utility systems or power, or industrial parks or highways or ports, the economy grows. And statistically, we can see that it does. So it creates the perception, and I wrote these reports creating the perception that this was going to help bring prosperity to all the people. But that's a false perception. And over time, I saw that that really brought prosperity to a few people, because GDP, the measure that we use, is totally skewed to the wealthy. And for example, if you look at the United States today,
Yeah.
three individuals have as much wealth as half the population of the United States. If those three individuals made 10% return on their investment last year, and half the population of the United States lost 3%, you'd still show a growth in GDP of something around 5%. And so,
bonkers.
yeah, and so that's why I realized, I'm an economic hitman. I'm hitting these countries. I'm getting them to pay our corporations that make huge profits by investing in these systems that make money for a few of the leaders of those countries and their families and friends, but are actually putting everybody else in deeper poverty because the money is being diverted from health and education and other social services to pay off the interest on the debt. But again, it was all about perception.
So I want to go back to those questions, because these are such large global problems. You talk about them on many different scales, of a national scale, a global scale. In the United States, there's state levels with it. Sometimes as an individual, you feel so small and you feel as if your one bit of action, your one letter doesn't matter. So let's talk about your questions, which are really actionable things that you can do every day and think about. And what do you advise people to do when they're combating feelings of belittlement and smallness?
Right. Well, first of all, we all have a lot more power than we realize. As Gandhi, you pointed out, he said, I couldn't have done what I did without all the support from people behind me that you'll never see their names in history books. You'll see mine, but you won't see theirs. But I couldn't have done it without them. So we all have that. And of course, now in an election year, with all that's going on, we have to realize that we all participate in this. But the 5 questions, and as a daily practice that uses these questions, this is not the daily practice, this is the questions behind it. Question number 1, and I'll use an example here. Question number 1, what will bring me the most satisfaction for the rest of my life? What do I want to do tomorrow for the rest of my life? And I would answer that by saying, I want to write. I love to write. I'm a writer. I love to write. I have a friend who's kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum in some respects. He's a carpenter. He would say, I love to work with my hands and wood. Second question, how do I do this, reach my own personal satisfaction in a way that helps others? Because we're all happier when we help others. And so the other may be one person, or it could be the world. So I would answer that question by saying, I will write stories that inspire people to make their lives better and to make the world a better place. My carpenter friend will say, I want to use sustainable materials. That's how I'll help make the world a better place and help my clients. And the third question then is, what gets in your way? What's the Jaguar stopping you from doing this? As a writer, I might say, well, I just don't have enough time in the day to write every day. And my carpenter friend would say, well, my clients don't want to pay more for sustainable materials. They're not willing to pay that extra cost from sustainable materials. When you go, so the 5th question is, what happens when you touch the Jaguar? What's the perception change? For me as a writer, I could say, well, I touched the Jaguar. It says, you could get up half an hour earlier every morning and write, or you could cut back an hour on television every evening, or 3 evenings a week, or whatever, and write. You can make the time. And my carpenter friend, when he touches that Jaguar, it says, tell those people that the increased price is not a cost. It's an investment in the future. They're investing in their own future and the future of future generations of their children and grandchildren. And then the 5th question is, what actions do I take every day? Well, as a writer, I got to write, or almost every day. You just got to write, and be willing to throw a lot of your writing out just because it's practice. Just like a pianist has to practice on piano every day, even if they're not in front of an audience. And my carpenter friend, he's got to start doing this carpentry that way, but also spread the word. He doesn't have to write poems. He doesn't have to be eloquent. oh, look, he points to the cabinet he just made or the house that he just built and says, hey, I just want you to know you might have paid a little bit more for the sustainable materials that this is made from, but it's not a cost, it's an investment. And you can be proud to tell your children that you've made this investment. It's like you might have invested in their education or something. And so those 5 questions: what will bring me the most satisfaction for the rest of my life? What is keeping me from doing that? What's the Jaguar holding me back? When I touch that Jaguar, how does it change my perception? And I forgot the second one, which is how does this tie in with helping other people? And then the last one, what actions do I take every day to make this happen? And it's quite simple. And then if we have this daily practice that we can do for 7 or 8 minutes a day, or 3 days a week, or 1 day a week, that really moves us forward in this. And we also recognize that those last 3 questions, what gets in my way? What's the Jaguar? How do I change the perception? What actions do I take? Those are going to change.
Yeah.
You know, like I've got time to write. I put aside half an hour every morning, I get up a little earlier every morning, and I watch a little less television. I made the time. Oh, but now the next Jaguar is, oh, what am I going to write about?
Writer's block.
Right. And then the next question, once I decide what I'm going to write about, well, how do I start it? What's the first sentence? You know, and so, but each time we touch those Jaguars and move on, we're moving to a higher level of consciousness and a greater satisfaction with ourselves and our lives. Every time we go through this practice, we're getting happier, and we're feeling more satisfied. And yeah, there may be there's work involved. Yeah, you got to actually write, you got to actually do the carpentry stuff. But the main thing is changing the perception around whatever's holding you back, whatever that Jaguar is that's blocking you. And realize when you touch that Jaguar, it then gives you the energy, the creativity, the power, the wisdom, the patience, whatever it is you need to move forward.
I want to end our conversation on that, but then move on to questions that any of our viewers might have, because I think that's just such a powerful place for like the official part of the talk. But if anybody has any questions that's watching right now, feel free to type your questions out in the chat that's there. I know someone asked about you being a writer and asked about how you marry being a businessman and an economist and as a writer, because sometimes people think that those are antithesis of each other, but you do a really great job of blending. And what drove you to that, and how did you get to that place where you could blend them?
That's a great question. I love that. Thank you. So I was an English major in college, like I think you were, Michaela.
I was English and theater, which I just decided I wasn't going to make any money. It's fine.
Well, there you go. That's your Jaguar.
Right, true.
But so and I had been a great writer in high school. I'd been editor of my newspaper. I'd won a short story prize. I got to my freshman year in college. I had this English teacher who was quite famous. He was well published. He was a writer. I had tremendous respect for him. He hated my writing. He wouldn't give me anything above a C. It destroyed me. It totally destroyed. I quit college as a result. I mean, there was a couple of others, but that's why I quit college. And when I went back to college, instead of English, I majored in economics and then business administration. I didn't want to write anymore. I just didn't want to. It hurt so much because my writing was so important to me that having this I was shattered. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to write. So that was a big Jaguar, not going to write. And then I reached a point where I realized that I really wanted to get back to writing. I got into business. I'd become an economist. And I realized I had some stories once I got out of being an economist that need to be told to the world. The economic hitman stories, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, the stories that ended up there. But I was afraid of writing because of this. So the Jaguar I touched was, wait a minute, that English professor, he didn't like Bob Dylan's writing either. Bob Dylan just won the Nobel Prize in Literature. What does the English teacher know? He's just a human being. And so touch that Jaguar and say, don't listen to that voice anymore. This voice of the English teacher was this voice. Oh, I start to write. I'd hear this voice saying, you can't write. You're a lousy writer. Now I've touched that Jaguar and it's dissolved. And I hear the voice, you can write. Bob Dylan was a great writer. Maybe that's a great example to follow. And so I'd gone out and been a chief economist, an economic hitman, had all these experiences, and realized that once I got out of there, my conscience bothered me. At some point, I began to see that what I was doing was not what was not the perception we were selling as to helping poor people reach prosperity. Once I got out of there, I knew I needed to write about it. And so I went back to what I love most in life, which is writing. And I've got to say, I was never happy as an economic hitman, as a chief economist. I was leading what I thought was the American dream, but I was not a happy camper at all. And, once I get into writing, I'm very happy.
So, but talking about writing, what advice do you have for nonfiction writers? You spoke briefly at the beginning about finding a narrative within the nonfiction, and other than the wonderful, obvious advice we have from this book that you've gifted us of Touching the Jaguar, but what advice do you have for someone maybe wanting to start or explore their craft of narrative nonfiction?
Well, do it. That's the first advice.
That's great. It's true. It's great advice.
And, not knowing, so everybody has a story to tell. I mean, everybody's got a story to tell. Everybody's had Jaguars. You've touched a lot of Jaguars, I'm sure, Michaela, and we all have, and those are all great stories. I mean, there's great stories. There's great books written about, eat. What was that one? Eat, sleep, and love. Eat. What is it?
Pray, love.
Eat, pray, love. I mean, it was just a story of traveling around, and it could have been a very boring story, but she made it very exciting. And I mean, everybody's got a story. So if you want to write the story, just start and think about what it is that's exciting about it. Why did you do this? What is exciting about it? And I also have to say, you just got to keep writing. I've taught courses on writing, and one of the things that often comes up is, well, I mean, how much writing do I have to do? And my answer is, I think I've probably written 1,000 pages for everyone that's ever been published. And they're all practice and they're all fun. You got to have fun writing, have fun doing it. But it's like I said, a concert pianist practices for 1,000 hours. And that's a rough guess for both cases. For every hour they're on the concert stage. Tennis player practices for 1,000 hours for every hour she's out there on the professional circuit. So it's doing it and it's enjoying it, and realizing that maybe sometimes when you got to fine tune, you're working with an editor or somebody, and there's aspects of it that take some discipline. There's no question, but to basically enjoy that process and enjoy what you're writing about. And if you're not enjoying what you're writing about today, then write about something else. Say, well, what would make me feel good to write about today, and move into that aspect of it.
Thank you for that. I'm sure that our viewers are very happy with those pieces of advice. And I promise if you want more, you need to read the book. But someone wants to know, can you give us any other anecdotes from your time in the Peace Corps?
Oh, yeah. There's so many, but here's one that goes along with these times. So once I left the jungle after a couple of years, and I spent another year in the Peace Corps up in the Andes studying with a shaman there, a woman shaman with a magnificent name of Maria Juana. Maria Juana Yamberla. She was Quechua, high Andes. And I remember one time someone I was with asking, so how do we save the earth? And Maria Juana says, well, she laughs and she says, well, the earth's not in danger. Pachamama, Mother Earth, is not in danger. We people are, and maybe we take other species with us, but we're like so many fleas. If we get to be too much of a nuisance, she'll just shake us all off. And then Maria Juana points up at this volcano that hovers over her home called Imbabura. And she said, well, just a few years ago, that volcano was covered with a massive ice cap. It isn't anymore. And so Pachamama's twitching. She's sending us a message. And we need to be smart enough to listen to that message. This is a great time to be alive, Maria Juana said, because we're capable of listening to the message that the earth is sending. And Michaela, over the years since then, every time there's been a major earthquake or hurricane or tsunami or the fires in California or Australia, wherever, I thought about this and thought that's the earth twitching. But but people have tended to take that as a local issue. So if I survive a hurricane, I expect that the outside world is going to come to my rescue in a few days. Maybe it's going to take a week or two, but water is going to arrive, bottled water, and food's going to arrive. And then I'm going to be encouraged to rebuild the way it always was, and maybe even better. So we didn't take this message too seriously. This coronavirus now is global, and it's sending that same message to everyone. And human beings are afraid of change. That's the biggest Jaguar we all have to touch. We don't want to change. Okay, we need a life economy, but what does that mean? Do I have to give up my job? Do I have to give up flying to South America like I do? What does that mean for me? We're afraid of change, but this coronavirus is global. It's taught us all that we can change. And we may be resisting it, and different people are resisting it at different levels, but we've all made huge changes. This program that we're doing right now, when you and I are not in your bookstore.
Yeah.
I think this conversation.
I get it.
Yeah, but we may ultimately reach a lot more people and a lot more diverse group of people. You know, I know that you're on YouTube, and I don't know how many people are watching right now, but how many will watch over the next weeks or months too. So this becomes available, which one, if we were doing it at a bookstore, that wouldn't be the case. And so we've all experienced that we are more flexible than we realize we are, and we have the means to do things that we never realized we could do before. And so what Maria Juana said, you know, so this is a very big twitch that Pachamama has given us, whether you look at it shamanically as she does, as living earth twitching, or whether you look at it scientifically, that we've seen that when we cut back on economic activity, people can start to see the stars in places they never could see them before, like Beijing and Los Angeles. You know, we see that we see the harm that we've been doing and what happens when we stop doing it to a certain degree. So so that was a great lesson. That was, you know, Ecuador, well, indigenous people around the world have taught me many amazing lessons.
That's incredible. I love hearing that. To me, in my head of being a bookseller, I thought of it as like a children's picture book. Like that's a really great anecdote about like what's happening with climate change. Of like the earth she's so powerful, but she's twitching and she's irritated. I don't know. That was just it was really great. And as a Coloradan, trust me, I really appreciated her name. I wanted to, you mentioned about how your book applies to coronavirus and how, you know, it applies to climate change. And I wanted to just open the door to you about anything else you might want to add about how this book can apply to what's going on in our world at this very moment.
Well, my intent with the book, of course, I didn't know there would be coronavirus or all the race.
You did. I need you to get a lottery ticket, and you need to get now.
Or all the issues around racism, et cetera. But I did know that there were these terrible events that were occurring, these once in 100-year events, the hurricanes, et cetera, that were occurring every year or so. And so as it turns out, the book is actually perfect for these times because it takes people through a series of stories that I hope are fun to read and exciting and include the incredible examples, not only of the indigenous people, but recently we've seen business moving toward a life economy. We've seen the advent of B corporations and benefit corporations. My publisher was the first publisher to be a B corporation. And we've seen the movements of conscious capitalism and the Green New Deal, and 192 of the world's most powerful executives coming together last August in the Business Roundtable to basically say, we need to create a life economy. They say that we can no longer have the goal of short-term profits alone. We need to work with the communities. We need to help the environment. So we've been seeing this movement in that direction. So I think, you know, we're at incredibly powerful times right now. And the book goes into all of that, and I through stories, and then in the end, really encouraging every reader to see this as a magnificent time to be alive and to participate in perhaps the greatest revolution that human beings have ever known. It's a consciousness revolution. It's an awakening to the fact that we live on a very fragile space station, the Earth, and we human beings, we're the pilots. We've been navigating her toward disaster, but we can turn that around. And basically all we have to do is change our perception of what it means to be human on this planet and to relate to the animals and the plants and the whole planet. What does that really mean? What is success? It's not about the short term, it's about the long term. And so, that's really the message of the book, that each of us has a role to play in turning us around. And it's fun. We mustn't burn out. Everybody who's involved should do exactly what they love to do and look at it as connecting. We can all take very different paths. The path of the carpenter or the plumber or the teacher or the spiritual leader or the writer or the bookseller. These are all different paths, but if we all head for the same destination, which is creating an economic system that will regenerate itself, that will recycle, and that will clean up pollution, that will take us toward a system that's truly beneficial to the future. If we all take our separate paths, but we head for that same destination, we'll get there. And it's an exciting time to be alive. It's very, very exciting.
And that's something that I found from the book too, was that there's a sense of hopelessness that comes with this time. And like I talked about that feeling small, but there was something in your book that was so hopeful about the idea of changing your perspective and realizing that this is an opportunity, like you said, not necessarily our fate's not already set in stone. I'm curious, what is next for you? What are you working on right now? Can you give us a little teaser, or are you publisher forbidden, or what can you hint at what's next for Mr. Perkins?
Well, the book just came out mid-June, just
Yes.
less than a month ago, and I've been doing a lot of these.
All the promotion, yeah.
But I love to write, and I've been working on a bunch of short stories that are fiction. But they were stories that I started writing when I was an economic hitman. Back when I didn't dare write, I was writing, but I wasn't trying to get published. I wasn't writing for anybody. I at the beginning of this notebook I wrote, I'm never going to show any of these to anybody. This is just for me. And I've gone back into some of those short stories, and I'm wordsmithing them a bit now, and augmenting them, and I'm having fun doing that when I take the time to do that. So that's a new one for me, because all my other books. Yeah, because all the other 10 books I've written that have been published are nonfiction. But I also want to add one other thing, Michelle, and that is talking about this consciousness revolution. There's another aspect, and that is that whenever there's a revolution, there's a pushback. The status quo tries to stop it. And I know a lot of people out there right now are thinking, well, yeah, maybe we're going through this consciousness revolution, but think of what's going on in politics, think of what's, and so on and so. Yeah, that's always happens. Those who represent the status quo want to keep things the status quo, and so they try hard not to let the revolution happen. But revolutionaries, or maybe we'd rather think of ourselves as agents of change, because it's a different form of revolution, a consciousness revolution, take power from that. We take energy from the pushback. It's like a good martial artist knows that you don't try to overpower someone who's a lot bigger and stronger than you. You use their strength. You're clever. You take their strength on and turn it around and use it against them, and to go with you against them. And so we're at a time like that now, where we need to understand that the pushback, that the politicians and the business people and others who are trying to stop us, they're recognizing that we're right, we're winning. And we take energy from that. That's part of getting that energy from the Jaguar.
Absolutely. John, thank you so much for this wonderful, enlightening, honest, and vulnerable discussion. I'm so grateful. I really recommend to anyone out there to get a copy of Touching the Jaguar, which I apologize, I don't have a copy to hold up because I got the ebook ARC copy, but John has one there with the beautiful Jaguar cover. You guys can get that at tatteredcover.com or come into the store. I know we have copies because I put them on the shelf the other day. So I recommend that you guys come in and pick up a copy of Touching the Jaguar. John, if you just want to take a minute and tell people where they can find you on social media or your website or anything like that.
Thank you. Yeah, johnperkins.org, or you can go to touchingthejaguarbook.com. And either one of those, but you might as well start with johnperkins.org, and you can join a Facebook group that, I'm on Facebook anyway, but there's a Facebook group that you can join on there that we do meetings every couple of weeks, which are fantastic. It just recently had 3 shamans from Central America, Mayan shamans, do a fire ceremony live with all of us participating in it virtually, which was a lot of fun. So John Perkins.
Technology.
Yeah, and it's, if you go on now, you can go back to that. It's on video now too. You can get it if you go to johnperkins.org or touchingthejaguarbook.com. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, John, again. My name is McKaylee. I'm with Tattered Cover Bookstore, and this live stream will also be on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it back if you missed any moments. John, I'm going to ask you to stay on the line, but we'll cut the live stream here and just say thank you all and happy reading.
Thank you, McKaylee.
And we're out.